Hey, what's going on? All right, take two. So if you're watching this later, my first attempt at the word for this week, at least the way I thought it was going was that I was in my office, my other office, and the internet was awful. I should know that. I worked in there for 5.5 years. It's a little more quiet and kind of out of the way, so I thought I would give it a shot. It didn't work out. So it was a little distracting to me, so I was a little off of it. I apologize. If you're hopping in here for take two, God bless you. I love you. We're gonna give this another stab. I think I got my thoughts a little more together. So I appreciate your grace. I hope you watch this later, and I hope it blesses you. So I've been having a good time doing Wednesday's Word, and it's been challenging me to get into the Scriptures and to look for something that God's going to speak to us, that He's already spoken in His Word. And so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to talk about roots today. You'll see what I mean in a second. Hopefully it makes sense to you. But I just want to read some stuff from First John, the first letter of John. It's kind of all the way back in the Bible. And again, man, if you watch this later and you say, man, I'm not a Christian, I don't believe any of that junk, that's fine. Like, I hope this is the kind of thing that just encourages you regardless, and I hope it's something that is used to stir up some interest, Listen, I'm 27 years old. I'm passionate about people. I'm passionate about seeing the issues in the world and the injustices of the world healed and fixed. I just, in my experience, have come to believe that the only way that's going to happen is if a power and love greater than ourselves guides and directs us. So that's why I'm doing this. So I hope you'll get into it. If you got a Bible laying around, jump to the back, 1 John chapter 4. I'm going to get into it, and I've got my phone resting precariously on the ledge of a bookshelf, so I'm guessing at the way this day has gone already, it's just going to fall off in the middle of the video. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, so 1 John chapter 4, he says this. He says, "Dear friends," this is verse 7, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed His love among us. He sent His one and only Son into the world that we might live through Him. This is love, not that we love God, but that He loved us and sent His Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins." I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. He says in verse 16, second half of 16, he says, "God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in him. In this way, love is made complete among us, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. Because in this world, we are like Him. There is no fear in love." Let me say that again. There is no fear in love. But perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. And I love this verse right here. We love because He first loved us. We love not to get His love, not to get His attention, but we love because He first loved us. So here's my thought. Here's my word for this Wednesday. The word is roots. And I'm talking about the root of your life. What is at the core of who you are? What is it that everything else grows out of? So here's why I thought about that. So I was looking out, while I was reading that passage at home, I was looking out in our yard, and we have this giant this giant tree vine called a wisteria. If you've never seen wisteria, it is an exotic, beautiful vine that grows these incredible flowers. They've got them in gardens like in Japan, all over the place. It's amazing. The problem with wisteria, for as beautiful as it is it takes over everything. Last summer, when we first bought the house, we had to cut it back. Now, it's about 3 or 4 feet from the house, okay, where the main trunk is. We had to cut back its branches about 6 times over the summer, conservatively 6 times, so that it wouldn't touch the house. It was growing feet the whole summer. It was crazy. And so we've thought about, what do we do with this thing? What do we do with this beautiful plant so that we can get it to flower and do what it's supposed to do? I've thought, obviously you cut it back a bunch. That's what everyone tells you to do if you read up on it. You cut it back and you cut it back and you cut it back. You can also frame it. You can also put a structure around it, an archway or something like that to give it some place to grow. The previous owners of the house put some rebar up in the middle of the trunk to try to get it to grow. So the other thing you can do, and this was what my uncle, who's a lawn care guy, he said, listen, you can just uproot the thing and replant it in the back of your yard and let it do whatever it wants. That's a lot of work, and I don't feel like doing that, but it's a possibility. And it got me thinking about the things in my life that grow in ways that I don't want them to. I thought about the struggles I have. I thought about the tendencies I have, the temptations I have, the anger, the resentment, the bitterness, all those things that choke out the life inside of me. And how do I handle it? What are my options? What are your options when you've got something in your life that you don't want anymore or isn't going the way you want? What are your options? Well, our options, as I thought about it, was to cut it back and just keep hacking away at whatever that thing is. You can try to restructure it. You could try to give it a frame and maybe a context, or you can uproot it. I believe that we as human beings are inclined to do one of the previous two. We will either rather cut it away or we will try to reframe it. The problem is, if you cut it back, ultimately it just keeps growing. You haven't changed the nature of the thing at all. If you give it a frame or you put a structure around it, again, you haven't changed it. You're just trying to contain it and avoid it and figure it'll take care of itself. I think about, for instance, politics. Now, I'm not a political minded guy, and I'm not making this a political thing at all, but just an observation that isn't politics, it isn't the way our government run, just different forms of how we handle exactly what I'm talking about. You can cut something back, or you could put a new frame around it. One side of the aisle thinks that the frame should be a giant glass greenhouse. The other side of the aisle thinks that it should be a stake in the ground, and that the thing should be able to do its own thing. And there's a spectrum, of course. The point is, in that instance, really, depending on the situation and the nature of what you're trying to tackle, either will work. Just something to think about next time you get into a political rant on Facebook. Either can work, depending on the context and what you're facing. But I digress. So if structuring and framing doesn't work, and if cutting back doesn't work, then we have to handle the roots. We have to pull it up by the roots and get it out. And John, in his letter to the church, says that the only thing you can replant with, the only root that is going to properly take the place of what you're taking out of your life, is the love of God. We live in an era where we think that our love is going to be good enough, right? We think that if I can love somebody, or if I can serve, and if I can focus on making myself better, then the root problem in my life is going to take care of itself. As if our love is strong enough to overcome our issues. But that is so naive. Like, let's be honest for a second. Do you know yourself? I know me, and I know that my own love is inconsistent at best. Now, I have good days, but I've got a lot of bad days. I am not the answer to fixing my own problem. I can't be. And so John says the only answer is the love of God. He says that God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in him. And in this way, love is made complete. In other words, it's matured. It's allowed to grow in your life when you live in the love of God. And the catch is, again, it's not your love for God. It's not how many times you go to church. Like, if you say, well, I haven't been to church, I'm not really a religious person, so I'm going to pull myself up and I'm going to get there. And do not hear this as you need to earn the love of God, or your love is what is going to be the foundation of your life. It can't be. It cannot be. The only thing that is going to be the proper foundation of your life and my life is the love and grace of God, because it's unchanging, because it's unfailing, because no matter what you do, no matter where you go, that love is always going to follow you, and it's always going to be there. And the only thing that can grow out of the love of God is love for others and love for yourself. If you try to love others, you might burn yourself out. If you try to love yourself, you can become a narcissist. But if you understand God's love for you, then you can't help but love the other person. You can't help but love yourself in the right way. Why? Because it says that he showed his love for us. This is back earlier in chapter 4. He showed his love for us by sending Christ, sending his only Son into the world that we might live in him. That's true love, gang. We look at the world and how messed up is it? We look at our country, how divided are we? The only answer, it's not going to be to frame it in a new way. It's not going to be to cut it back and keep trying to hack off the branches. We have to pull up the root of our own hatred and our own division and our own narcissism, and we have to replace it with the love of the creator of the entire universe. And when we do that, only love and only grace and compassion can flow out of that. Remember, it's not your love for God. It's his love for you. That's why John ends, he says, we love because he first loved us. So I hope that encourages you. I hope that challenges you. Man, I want to see love extended in new ways. I want to see, rather than a vine and a weed of hatred and discord take over your and my life and our country and our world. Man, I want to see that thing uprooted and replaced with the love and mercy of Jesus Christ. He died for us. It's Lent, right? So we're thinking about how he died. He sacrificed himself and he rose from the grave that we might have new life in him. That's the only hope we have. And it's the only hope we need, isn't it? So share this, share that word, man. If I didn't say it the way it needed to be said, I pray that God would speak it to you anyway. That the root of whatever it is, whatever your root is, can be uprooted and replaced with the root of his grace and his love for you. And you'll never be the same. So I love you. Thank you for tuning in to Take Two. Hope it went a little better than the first one. And share this. Not for my sake, but share it because I believe it's the Word of God, and I believe it still has power. I believe it's still inspired. I believe it's still the most important thing that we have today, even in the 21st century. So, I love you. I'll be back next week, and I hope you share this, and I hope you share the love of God wherever you go. And it's in his name. Have a good Wednesday.